That gets me to like why now? Why did you write a book about resilience now?
So as I said, I worked on systemic risk before. So it's like the banking system or the financial system. How can we measure systemic risk? I developed this systemic risk measure, COVAR, which is the value at risk. But so typically the way we measure risk was all how risky is this particular bank. But we never really measured how risky is that some bank goes under and then it will drag another bank down. Okay, so there's a difference between the risk of an institution in isolation and the risk of a bank going down, dragging another bank down, the spillover effect. So we had to develop some risk measures focusing on the spillover risks, and that's the thing. And then coming back to this volatility paradox, you realize very quickly that, being in a world where you put it seems very strong, very stable, very rigid, then the system seems very stable, but it's actually underneath, it's not stable at all. And that's where the flexibility comes in, and so arguing for more flexibilities. And why now? I think it was the case that when COVID started in March 2020, I started a webinar series inviting some key thinkers to economists, historians, and policymakers as well, to help us to get through this period and figure out what to do. And it's still ongoing. And the initial motivation of this book was essentially to summarize all the insights I gained from this webinar series. But then I thought, there's no common thread in this summary. So then I thought about how can I make a common thread, red line going through the whole book. And then the resilience concept was essentially the one coming back to bringing all of this under the same roof, essentially, of resilience.
Yeah, and you also related a lot to this massive crisis that we've seen. I'm not sure if I can yet say that we have seen it in the past tense, but that is COVID, of course, right? Mm. And I was wondering, is this also another example that we're just now starting to see where China and Western societies have a very different approach? And perhaps you could say that China had more of a robustness approach, which seemed more successful at the start, but just now, the city of Shenzhen has gone back into full lockdown because perhaps it wasn't resilient enough.
Resilient, yes. So very much so. So there are two aspects to it. So in resilience, you always want to have a crisis containment element, and you also want to have a bounce back element. So there's two elements. If you go for resilience, the second element is very, very important. And the COVID crisis, essentially, this bouncing back was to develop some good vaccines. So that was one key element for the bouncing back. Mm-hmm. And the West was focusing very much on this new technology, mRNA vaccines, and that actually was a big component of the resilience effort. You didn't see that in China. So generally, I would put out a conjecture, essentially, that democratic societies, open societies, which allow discourse and all this, seem much more volatile and seem weaker. It's a little bit like the reed. While more authoritarian societies seem much more robust. But then there is at some point a robustness barrier. You break through and then suddenly you have regime change and you have one dictator is replaced by another dictator, while democratic society transition is much more smooth. And there's a hypothesis there. So I didn't spell it out explicitly and make it more like a hypothesis because, you also see some democracies going south. The Weimar Republic in Germany between the two world wars went south too. So it's not, 100% foolproof thing. But in general, I would say if you have an open society, the information flow goes from the bottom up, and this actually helps it seems much weaker because there's constantly controversies and debates and all this. But at the end, it might be more resilient compared to a society which is very, very rigid.